Okay, so today's discussion basically is going to be entirely based on the ROPs of an MUN, and that's what we are going to discuss in this today's meet. Okay, so to begin with, basically, you've been already given an introduction about what an MUN is, what all committees are we dealing in for this specific Erudite Model United Nations, and how to research or what are these topics related to. So I'll be only focusing on the research part and the ROPs that you need to follow for the committees for this United Nations conference. So basically, to start with, we majorly have four UN committees and one Indian committee and an international press. So to begin with, for the UN committees, the ROPs are very simple that I'll be elaborating, and we have similar ROPs for the Indian committees also. But first, we'll be focusing on the UN committee ROPs. So to begin with, I'll be starting with how a committee generally starts. Usually in the starting of the committee, we have an option for all the delegates to be having an attendance by the executive board for the delegates. So before I say what executive board is going to be your judging panel and also a panel which will be facilitating your committees, help you in going through the entire 2 days conference. Okay, so to start with, the executive board will be taking an attendance for all the delegates. The delegates would be marking their attendance in two forms, which is one is present and the second one is present and voting. Okay, so the two ways of marking attendance is present and voting. So the present means that you're present in the committee, only that, and you will be abstaining yourself from all the voting rights for the further working papers and all the other draft resolutions that we'll be passing. You won't have a say in that. You'll be abstaining from them. And present and voting means that you will be voting in all the future voting sessions for all those purposes. So once the voting is done as present and voting, like the executive board will be calling for delegate of Ukraine, delegate of US, delegate of Russia, and you will always marking your attendance as present and voting, and so as follows. Now moving on to what after the attendance is done. Okay, so once the attendance is done, the next procedure and the next step is that you will be having your GSL. GSL round is basically the round in which each delegate gets to speak. General speaker list. That's what GSL means. So in general speaker list, all the people present in the room would get a decision to be expected to be speaking for a general time being 90 seconds, and it's an inexhaustive list. You can keep adding to the list. It keeps on repeating once the list ends if we have that much time. And then after, what the speaker of like the delegate would be recognized by the executive board according to the attendance list, and by that sequence, the speakers and the delegates would speak one by one for their country. The total time given to per speaker by default is maximum 90 seconds, could be restrained by the executive board if they want so. To don't be sure that if you've written a 90-second speech, you would be sure that you would be giving a 90-second speech. That totally depends on the amount of time taken, or the amount of time is in the hand of the executive board or the committee has. After that, the next step that we'll be moving on to is, once the GSL speaker list starts, what we'll be doing is the 90-second speeches will be given. Then each delegate has this one provision which is called as yielding of time. What yielding of time means, like if a delegate has chosen a time of 90 seconds to speak, but they choose to speak only for 75, the rest 15 seconds could be yielded. Now, the yielding of time is usually done in three ways. तीन तरीके से yielding होती है. Yield to the executive board को yield कर सकते हो. Yield to the fellow delegates, साथ वाले जो delegates है कमेटी में, आप उनको वो 15 सेकंड दे सकते हो किसी एक specific delegate को बोलने के लिए. And yield to the POI, that is point of information. In further questions पूछने के लिए आपको अपने 15 सेकंड बचा सकते हैं. So this is the three ways that you yield your leftover time. Now moving to the next, the entire committee runs after, other than the GSL, there are two informal sessions that usually happen in the committee, which are known by the name of moderated caucus and unmoderated caucus. Now, what happens in moderated caucus and unmoderated caucus? Basically, these are the sessions in which you usually discuss the technical part of the topic, in which you discuss the subtopics, in which you discuss what further are we going to discuss as subtopics under your agenda. Now, Okay, so now when we come to the unmoderated caucus and moderated caucus is a more formal kind of a discussion than the unmoderated caucus. In the moderated caucus, you discuss the technical agenda that you guys have chosen for the committee. It's on the delegate to choose those agenda. Delegate can raise motions to choose those agendas, and then you then you vote on an agenda. Once that agenda gets passed, that's how an agenda is passed in a committee, by the voting of all the people who have marked themselves as present in voting. Once they pass an agenda, that means a subtopic, then the topic, and then the discussion on that topic starts in a moderated caucus. So the main discussion is done in the GSL, which is on the agenda that's given to you. Any subtopic discussions that you need to do in the committee has to be raised by the delegate and then discussed in the moderated caucus. So the moderated caucus is technical discussion, and when we come talk about the unmoderated caucus, caucus usually talks about the lobbying part, the informal discussion that happens between the delegates to set the flow of the committee, to set the new of how do you want to run the committee further, आगे committee कैसे चलानी है, ये सब discuss करने के लिए, lobbying करने के लिए आप unmoderated caucus का time use कर सकते हो. अब how do we get into a moderated caucus and unmoderated caucus, and how do we pick a motion? So basically, we raise a motion to get into one of these. So to raise a motion, one delegate has to be recognized by the executive board. Each delegate gets an option to be get recognized. You need to raise your placards. Once you raise your placards, the executive board recognizes you. Once you're recognized, you get a liberty of getting into a new motion by raising an agenda. So, excuse me, yeah. So how do we do that? We raise a motion to get an informal debate by saying that I, the delegate of so-and-so country, would like to suspend the formal debate and enter into a moderated caucus for the topic or the agenda being so-and-so, for the total time being 90 minutes or 60 minutes, and per speaker 20 minutes. 90 and 60 is too much. So 20 minutes and per speaker time being 60 seconds. So this is how we get into the motion. Once this motion is passed by the committee, there are taken as seconds in the committee. Second means who all are supporting this agenda, all the voting for the committee, how many people agree to this agenda or how many people do not agree to this agenda. This agenda can be raised by any number of people in the committee. Those agendas will be voted upon. Whosoever's agenda gets passed will be further discussed in the moderated caucus. Now, after the moderated caucus agenda gets chosen, what next is done is the speakers for the moderated caucus get get selected by the executive board by again showing your placards, and the executive board recognizes the speakers. All the speakers were recognized for that selective motion get to speak based on the amount of time that the committee has in hand. Okay, so that's how you enter into a moderated caucus or into an unmoderated. For the unmoderated caucus, also you need to say the same thing, which is I, the delegate of so-and-so country, would like to suspend the motion of moderated caucus or of a formal debate and enter into an unmoderated caucus for a total time being 60 minutes or 30 minutes or 20 minutes whatsoever is feasible as per the total time that the committee has. Okay, so once this is how you enter both the motions, that is clear. The voting is done for the agendas, that is also clear. So as of now, I have discussed how to start a committee by the voting procedure. Then moving on to the next part, what we do is the GSL. After the GSL, everybody gets a 90 seconds time period. If not, then they yield their time. After that, coming to the moderated and the unmoderated caucus, how do you enter a moderated and an unmoderated caucus? That's what we've discussed. After discussing how do we enter a moderated and unmoderated caucus, the next thing is how to pick a motion. That also I told you that I, the delegate of this in this country, that's the exact line that you use to raise the to enter into a motion. After you enter into the motion, the moderated caucus keeps on going. And once you leave the moderated caucus and the unmoderated caucus, you can again start with the GSL. So GSL does not get exhausted. I initially also told it's an inexhaustive list. So like initially in GSL, only 6 delegates got to speak, and then an unmoderated caucus or a moderated caucus started. And then once the moderated caucus stops or the unmoderated caucus stops, you can again get into the GSL again. And the other delegates who have not spoken earlier get the chance to speak. The other delegates of the country get the chance to speak. So that's how the committee for 2 days keeps running. Any other particular changes, differences as per the committee would be told to you by the executive boards also. Executive board have entire discretion to change certain rules according to the committee's welfare and how to run the committee and what will be in benefit of the committee. Okay. So now we move on next to what all documentation do we do at the end of the entire committee. So basically the documentations which are majorly done in a UN committee are number one, a press release, which is a very basic regular document. Number two, which is the working paper, which is another important document. And after the working paper, the next and most important document is the draft resolution. So these are the three kinds of documentation which are usually taken or done in the UN committee. So basically when we talk about a press release is basically an entire summary of the committee that's done. So a press release usually gives you कि 2 दिन का पूरा कमेटी ने क्या क्या डिस्कस हुआ, क्या क्या रेजोल्यूशन निकाले, क्या क्या सॉल्यूशंस हैं, या जो भी ओवरऑल वर्किंग ऑफ द 2 days कमेटी तुम वो लिखोगे, दैट वुड बी योर प्रेस रिलीज. After the press release, the next document that we're talking about here is a working paper. A working paper is just like a resolutions. You all write जिस कंट्री ने जो रेजोल्यूशन उस कमेटी में फॉर्म किए, वो रेजोल्यूशन यू पुट टुगेदर दोज रेजोल्यूशन, लॉबी ऑन दोज रेजोल्यूशन एंड गेट टुगेदर विद अ पेपर विच इज कॉल्ड एज अ वर्किंग पेपर, एंड इट गिव्स यू द रेजोल्यूशंस फॉर द एजेंडा दैट यू वर डिस्कसिंग. Now, the most formal and the final document that I'm talking about is the draft resolution. So basically, the draft resolution has two types of clauses. So one is the preamblatory clauses and second is the operative clauses. So preamblatory clauses, what are they basically? Preamblatory clauses are all the acts that are done in the past and the solutions for those. So those are the preamblatory clauses. And the operative clauses are the future based clauses. That means the future action plan, that is within the 5-year or a 10-year action plan, that these will be the future things that we would be doing in related to the agenda. So there are two kind of clauses, preambulatory clauses and operational clauses, operative clauses. So preambulatory clauses will having what past issues you have had and what solutions you have for those. So these will be discussed in the preambulatory clauses, and in the operative clauses we'll be discussing the future action plan, what would be done in next 5 to 10 years. Not a very futuristic plan, just a 5-year or a 10-year. Limit yourself to the timeline. Okay. So other than this, this was all about the working of the committee. Any other queries that you have, you can leave down in the comment section. I would be replying personally to all those queries. Any other queries regarding the ROPs, any point of it that you did not understand. This was the overall how a committee works. Now, after I talk about how the committee works, the next thing is the point of privileges. So we basically have 5 points of privileges that we follow in the committee. And these points of privileges are also the point of privileges for the delegates. First is point of personal privilege, in which you can raise any query which is related to your personal disturbance in the committee. That is, you're not able to hear something, somebody was very quick and you were not able to register. Try to be very attentive. But if at all something was really ununderstandable, for that you could raise a query. Some personal discomfort, anything can be covered under a personal privilege. Now the next point is the point of inquiry. The point of inquiry is to the executive board. If you have any query regarding the operation of the committee, how the committee is working, any issue about it, any questions about it, to the executive board, this point is for the executive board. Delegate can raise a point of inquiry to the executive board. Next, again, is a point of order, which in UN committee is strictly limited to the executive board, not on the factual points to the delegates. That's not what we do. For the UN committees, we only raise point of order to the executive board. If there is any mistake done by the executive board, that's when you raise a point of order to the executive board. Now, next is the point of information, which you would be using mostly. That is like asking questions to the fellow delegates. To ask any question to a fellow delegate, whenever recognized, you can always raise a point of information. That is, you can raise a point of information to ask a question to a fellow delegate. Perfect. So these are all the points, and the entire committee is working for a UN committee. And for an Indian committee is an entirely similar process, just the documentation is a little different. It's a simpler documentation, and we usually make a press release or we make a bill or something. But if we don't have a Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha here, so we won't be going to the bill, we would be having a press release. All other points in the way of the committees remain the same. Now moving on to your research part. So basically you have been explained in the previous video that you have to research about the topics, how would you be researching on those agendas. But I would give you certain tips and tricks about how to research. Your research should be really intensive, factual, regressive. I mean, have a rigorous research, not regressive, sorry for that. Rigorous research for the entire topics. You need to rigorously go through what your country's stance is on the topic, how you're going to research, how you're going to present your countries, what has your country done about the topic, what are your country supposed to do about the topic. So ये सब आ जाएगा आपकी रिसर्च में country की. Now अब रिसर्च करने की कोशिश मेजरली कहाँ से करना. Don't try Wikipedia, normal googling, Quora. These are not the valid sources for research, and neither they will be accepted in the committee. So whenever you're going to put a research, try it to be reports of the UN, resolutions of UN, read valid newspapers like Reuters and stuff like that, PTI verified newspapers if it's an Indian article that you're picking up, and books or stuff which is valid. You try to do an intensive research through valid points and valid topics. Don't go through Quora or Wikipedia for your research, because those material is edited and not very appropriate. And you can take a help of UN websites, you can take a help of government websites. That's where you will get the valid research from. With this, we come to an end about the entire research and the ROPs. Other than this, if you have any questions, any queries, you can put down in the comment box, or contact the numbers that have been provided to you. You can contact them also. The easier way is put them in the comment box. You'll be getting replies for the queries that you have, or repeat and re-see the video again. It's a very simple procedure, nothing to worry about for all the first timers who think, जिनको अभी ये सुन के बहुत ज़्यादा complicated लग रहा है. Once you sit in the committee, you start practicing it, it will be very, very easy. That's it. Okay, sorry for that again. Okay, so with this, I would like to tell you that this is all that we were today. This session was about, and any queries, leave down in the comment box. Thank you so much.